All right, well, there are as many as 7 multi-party delegations that will be articulating India's stance against terrorism across 33 countries. The delegation led by Bejant Panda will depart on the 23rd of May and head to Saudi Arabia. This delegation comprises Nishikant Dubey, Fangon Konyak and Rekha Sharma, Asasuddin Owaisi, Satnam Sandhu, Gulab Nabi Azad and Ambassador Harshvardhan Shringla. The delegation will carry a customized dossier prepared by Indian intelligence and foreign policy experts. This dossier will highlight Pakistan's decade-long support and promotion of terror. The dossier will detail direct links between Pakistani state institutions and terror outfits like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Haqqani network. Additionally, clinching evidence from Mumbai 26/11, Pathankot, Pulwama and Pahalgam attacks is elucidated upon. The financial and the digital trail of terror funding from Pakistan to sleeper cells in multiple nations are also detailed. Apart from this, the Indian delegation will speak about Pakistan's non-compliance with Financial Action Task Force norms. It will also highlight the major international terror attacks, including the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks and the 2005 London bombing that had direct or indirect links to Pakistan. Well, India has made it abundantly clear that Operation Sindoor is our fight against terrorism. Through India's biggest diplomatic outreach, India wishes to expose the terror hub that Pakistan is. We'll talk about this with some prominent figures from around the world. Joining us on the show is Mr. Cliff Smith, National Security and Government Affairs Professional. He's joining us all the way from Washington, D.C., United States. Dr. Vail Awad, Middle East Affairs expert, is also with us. He's in New Delhi at this point in time. Mr. Jordan Cope, Middle East Affairs expert. He's joining us from Germany to talk more about this. So, Dr. Awad, I'll begin with you. A pleasure to have you and see you after a long time, sir. So, what do you make of India's very articulate way and, a smart and a courageous way of dealing with Pakistan? We have shown them our hard power. Now it's time to go out there and tell the world what Pakistan's reality is. They've been asking for proof about Pulwama, about Pahalgam, about 26/11, and the fact that the world should know, Dr. Awad, is that we have given this proof amply to Pakistan and Islamabad. But it's been put into courts where it's been tossed into a dustbin, because obviously a government that state sponsors terrorism, Mr. Awad, will never self-implicate. And that's why India has not been able to get some of these terrorists who still continue to be funded by Pakistan and live in Pakistan back to India. Your analysis of the entire situation, sir, and how brilliant a move is this when it comes to India sending members of parliament across party lines to the rest of the world?
Thank you, Vineet, for having me. And I think what India is trying to do at this moment is to change of the game of dealing with Pakistan. I mean, India have been for decades propagating and carrying the case of Pakistan state-sponsored terrorism throughout the world, and it has been proven more than once that there are indulgence of Pakistanis terrorists who have been actively doing a terrorist act in India. In fact, including the 26/11/2008 when we were in Bombay, and also we happened in Kargil as well in 1999. We know that the snipers were mostly Pakistanis, along with the jihadist group who have come across the border. And it was almost a war between India and Pakistan those years back. So therefore, India have been actually on the offensive against Pakistan politically, and also economically and also militarily. Politically, it has been always saying the thing, even after the jihadist culture in Afghanistan, where Pakistan played the major role of collecting all the mercenaries, thanks to the CIA and the Saudis who supported the Pakistanis, the ISI, and built up Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And that's the history tells you all about that. Most of those terrorists have emerged from that part of the world, and they have spread all over the world. And we know the case of Yemen, the case of Syria, the case of Libya, the case of Iraq. All they are remnants of all these terrorist organizations who have come all the way across from there, even including the CIS country. So I think in terms of India and Pakistan, we should understand that the Jammu and Kashmir issue has been the crux of the problem for Pakistan. Pakistan considers the cause of the problem with India, and India says there are comprehensive dialogue. We have more than one issue. Therefore, Pakistan never shied away from supporting the secessionist movement in Kashmir, even during the insurgency and all. We have been following the story there. But I think India at this stage needs to do this exercise diplomatically, globally, for two reasons. A, because there was lots of rumors and from the other side where they said India has not been in the offensive and did not give enough evidence to prove to the world that there are indulgence of Pakistani group. That's what the message we get from the media, which we follow in the West Asia and some of the countries which still think that they need more evidence. And I think this is a very smart move with all collective from all parties of India, the social media supporting the government, and also all strata of the society supporting the government. Let's see where India can take this offensive, can prove its case again, and vindicated its policy of saying that Pakistan is not going to be a good friend to India as long as the Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir issue is not being solved.
Absolutely right, Dr. Awad. You're spot on. Cliff, the Americans have also gotten involved in this. In fact, Donald Trump was the one who broke the news to most of the Indians that there's been a ceasefire. But obviously, that claim of ceasefire has been rubbished by India, that it was facilitated by Donald Trump. Having said that, do you think that the American involvement was inevitable because it got to a point where two nuclear countries, were, at the peril of hostilities that could have not only defined the South Asian region, but the rest of the world? And that's why this is a concern, not just for India and the subcontinent, but for the rest of the world as well?
Sure. I mean, the India-Pakistan dispute, particularly since they're both nuclear-armed countries, is always going to concern the rest of the world. They're going to worry that it'll spiral out of control, so on and so forth. So the U.S. as a preeminent power is certainly going to have some interest in what's going on there. But that said, I think I agree with Dr. Wad largely. I would add one little thing to it that perhaps just a slightly different take, and that is the Kashmir dispute doesn't happen in a vacuum. It really comes from two different conceptions of what the region is and what it's supposed to be. The concept of nationhood in Pakistan and India. As you probably know, or I hope most people know, the chief of the Pakistani army, Assam Munir, gave a speech just a few days before the attack. Let me read the part that's most interesting to me. He said, "We are different from the Hindus in every possible aspect of life. Our religion is different, our customs are different, our traditions are different, our thoughts are different, our ambitions are different. As a foundation of the two-nation theory that was led there. There are two nations. We are not one. Because of that, our forefathers mounted this incessant struggle to create this country." This ideology is sort of the polar opposite of India's, which believes in being able to successfully have different religions in the same country. And with India, now having more Muslims in it than Pakistan does, with its minorities, going along just fine, and Pakistan shrinking, I mean, their ideology is going to require them to conquer Kashmir. So my point is not that he's wrong. I'm just sort of trying to explain that, in my view, one of the issues that you have to deal with isn't just sort of a territorial dispute, who gets what. This is really, to a large degree, a fight over a very concept of nationhood.
Rope in Mr. Dowdy into this conversation. He's joining us from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. He's an international affairs expert. Mr. Dowdy, Saudi Arabia plays a very important role when it comes to the India-Pakistan conflict, doesn't it? Even when Abhinandan was captured by Pakistan, it is believed that it was Saudi Arabia that gave a call to Imran Khan to release him. Hostilities aside, India has always maintained that if Pakistan gives up terrorism, India will not have a problem with it. We will trade with them, we will do business with them, we will have a people-to-people connection with them. But the fact of the matter is that it's so deeply rooted, the state policy and terrorism together, that it's becoming very difficult to extricate both of them and make the world see. But what has happened recently after Operation Sindoor and this delegation going to all these different countries, 32 to be exact, do you think there is a chance that we will get to see a peaceful India and Pakistan relationship in the days to come?
Well, it's a question which itself has a big question mark. I can't see it in the, let's say, even after a couple of years, I don't see this is happening. But yes, there may not be a severe kind of combat or kind of war kind of situation. There are countries that are concerned about India and also for Pakistan there are many countries in this region. But when we talk about India in particular, we all know, even the entire world is aware that what India is suffering from, what kind of victims we have been the victims of terrorism, especially when we talk about Kashmir. We have enough, plenty of examples to quote, which everybody knows about it. And even the panel is agreeing. So here, the role of those progressive nations like there in the Middle Eastern countries, when you talk about Saudi Arabia, when you talk about UAE or about other countries, their roles are very important. And what I understand, they have a kind of a progressive approach. They have the diversified ways of handling these things, not accepting two things. One is terrorism. They do not, in fact, every sensible country is against these kinds of terrors. But when we talk about, especially about your question, these countries are focusing more, mainly on development, progress, and they have their vision. When they have their vision, they think of having the international peace, regional peace, prosperity, and they try their best. You already quoted, given so many examples that how things were pacified when these countries got involved. But what happens in this present scenario when we know that President Trump announced this ceasefire? And suddenly there was a kind of, it is in the media and everybody knows that there was a kind of external engagement, and this was the result. So what I understand that in the near future, for example, let's say in a year at least, and after especially these kinds of delegations and smart moves that India's diplomatic mission, the foreign ministry and the government of India has taken up. This is a smart move, and perhaps when our the group of intellectuals from India, and they go to those countries, especially they are the members of the United Nations and even other countries, and they just reiterate. I mean, as I said, the entire world knows what is the situation. And they know that India is the sufferer. They know that the terrorism is something which needs to be, addressed in unitedly by every nation of the world. Still, when our delegation visit different kinds, many countries, and they reiterate, they try to, there are two kinds of wars. It's one thing is like when two kinds of one army from one country, the other group from another country, and we have missiles. I mean, that is one kind of war. This is called diplomatic kind of, channelizing the right way
Hmm.
by approaching and reaching out to those friendly countries. They may be even in some cases, if we do not portray the right picture coming from
Right. Let me also get in Jordan Cope into this conversation, Mr. Dowdy. Let me bring in Jordan Cope as well. He was a Middle East affairs expert as well. Jordan, there is obviously a renewed interest by Donald Trump when you talk about the Middle East as well. He was very recently in Saudi Arabia. He's given a free pass to Syria as well. And of course, there is the Organization of Islamic Countries that supports Pakistan as well. In lieu of what's transpired in India and with India and Pakistan in the last few days, do you think that the Middle East is also an area that can exert pressures that will determine how this relationship ensues and pursues in the next few years?
So I think a number of Middle Eastern countries have certainly tried to assert themselves when it comes to mediation efforts in recent years, especially those being like Qatar, which has been involved in mediating between the US and the Taliban, and as well between Israel and Hamas in the current hostage crisis, that Hamas, a Qatari funded, that Hamas, a terrorist organization funded by Qatar, continues to reap the benefits of Qatar while Qatar continues to pull the strings in the background. I certainly wouldn't want Qatar to be involved in mediating Indian and Pakistani peace and conflict resolution, especially given how Qatar asserts itself in conflicts and resolves them in manners that are favorable to Islamist interests, Qatar being one of the largest Muslim Brotherhood funders in the world. And then, of course, we have Saudi Arabia that has recently been involved, if I recall properly, with mediation between Ukraine and Russia. And so I don't necessarily know if it's in the best interest to have Middle Eastern countries perhaps involved in conflict resolution between India and Pakistan. Instead, if I were India right now, I'd focus on getting Western allies to realize the dangers of Pakistani terrorism. Pakistani terrorism has definitely impacted the West as well. Osama bin Laden ultimately was assassinated very near to a Pakistani military base. It's to no coincidence that he had that protection in that compound so close to that military base in Abbottabad. And it should also be noted that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind behind 9/11, when the US was closing in on his arrest in Qatar, he ultimately escaped to Pakistan, being born in Pakistan himself. So the West ultimately needs to take terrorism much more seriously, especially when it comes from Pakistani state-sponsored groups. But India also has a lot to learn from terrorism that has plagued the West and its allies, such as Israel. In 2014, and Cliff Smith actually wrote about this, Jaish-e-Mohammed, an extremist group, released a photo of its members dressed up in Hamas attire, captioned, "We are all Hamas." And so it's important to realize that fighting terrorism in one place shouldn't be limited and contained to that one area. It should be against the overall ideology, fighting against Islamist terrorism and Muslim Brotherhood terrorism, certainly which are interconnected throughout the world. And so if I were India right now, I would raise the West's attention to the dangers of terrorism emerging from Pakistan. And if I were the West or its allies, such as Israel, I would remind India that it should probably as well designate terrorist groups that it has yet to do so, such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Jihad.
Dr. Awad, do you think that considering the fact that the IMF is also cracking a whip towards Pakistan, and more or less this is equivalent to the pressure that the Americans have also exerted on the IMF on how to deal with Pakistan, there is quite a possibility that there is a chance of peace prevailing unless and until Pakistan is compulsorily advocating terrorism at a deep state level?
Well, look, let's be very open about the discussion of terrorism. Is it seriously people are fighting terrorism? I mean, I am a person who lived in the countries in West Asia, and I live in South Asia for decades, and I know that nobody is fighting terrorism. Terrorism has been used as a tool to achieve political objective, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Iraq or Libya or Yemen, name it, and they have been using it. So let's not be hypocrisy of fighting terrorism. India has been a victim of terrorism for ages, for years. We have been, after the partition of India and Pakistan, we know that India have been suffering, and no one in the world was listening to India cries about its own suffering and they've been killed, only sympathizing with the Indian position. At the end of the day, if there is a serious fight against terrorism, they should have adopted the India Comprehensive Plan, which has submitted to a draft to the UN to adopt it. None of the country adopted it. So we don't know, is it a veteran? Is it somebody's terrorism is a good terrorist or a bad terrorist? Or is he a freedom fighter or is a jihadist? When it suits them, they will say he's a jihadist, he's a freedom fighter against the government, demonizing the other government. But when it comes to reality on the ground, it is all terrorists. There's anybody kill innocent people, he's a terrorist. Whether there is no religion attached to it. It just has been used, and most of them, yes, they are Muslim people, they have been used, but we have experienced in our country 83 nationalities, 173,000 terrorists came from all over the world through Turkey into Syria and Iraq, and they were supported by the West and certain Arab countries. That is the fighting against terrorism. It is the same thing happening here. They fought in Afghanistan. Now Pakistan is at the dire situation where there are movement inside Pakistan. Pakistan said themselves, even the defense minister of Pakistan said that for 30 years America has been using us. And now they're saying they are victim of terrorism. But if you are a victim of terrorism, fight terrorism regionally. Let the South-South cooperation come together and fight it. You do not have to people come and impose on you terrorists and leave them behind and run away. They left 60,000 terrorists in our country in the northeastern part of Syria. They are still under the American custody, along with the Kurdish forces in that region. And we had more than 65,000 in the northwest with the Turkey. Then where this terrorist has to go, none of the country is taking them back. What I'm trying to say here is, when you wanted to fight, you will fight on your own. Other country will sympathize with you on the terrorist issues, but they will never fight alongside with you to fight the terrorists, because this is South Asia is going to face the music. We are seeing, nobody is learning the lesson what happened in the Middle East and West Asia. All these people, extremism, fundamentalism is shifting gear from this part of the world into South and Southeast Asia. So the things is not over. India will have to face this terrorism on its own. It has to fight it together. You have to activate certain organizations within the South Asian region to make sure that you can fight terrorism. No one can fight terrorism alone. But we have to identify and say who is the terrorist and who should fight the terrorist. I think if the West and the East come together and reach to an agreement how to fight terrorism, we do not have terrorists all over the world. But using political Islam as a tool and to activate and regenerate a new terrorism hubs, I think South Asia again will be reviving.
All right, we have a paucity of time. I'm going to quickly take some closing comments from Cliff and Jordan. Cliff, just because terrorism is not a rampant problem in the Western world does not mean it can be slipped under the carpet. Do you agree that India's role in containing terrorism in association with the West powers, especially the Americans, is going to be a lot more defined now?
Let's just say I would hope so. I mean, there's too little understanding of what India is going on in India and what happens in South Asia. It's just not something that a lot of American policymakers think about in the same way they do Europe or the Middle East. That's unfortunate, because I think it's at least as important to our long-term future, but there's just a lack of understanding. And I agree with Professor Wad that there is this ideology does not know boundaries, and it is shifting locations. And I mean, India has long been a victim, but I do think they're more close to the epicenter of a lot of the important conflicts right now, as the sands of the Middle East have shifted, as things have happened in Europe and America. So let's just say I would hope that people would pay more attention to what's going on in India, because these things will inevitably spill over into other conflicts in other regions and other places, and it will inevitably affect our interests, particularly as I believe with the rising China and America's turn towards paying attention to what we can do in our competition with China. India will become increasingly important for American interest as well.
Fair enough. Valid points. Jordan, same question to you. We have a paucity of time. Your closing comments on this ever-evolving dynamics, this relationship that India is trying to construct with the developed world and make them understand this nuisance of terrorism.
I think I agree with Dr. Awad and his point that oftentimes nations fight terrorism alone, and that's the sad reality of the world. If you look at the current status of the United States in recent years, we've elevated the status of some of the world's largest de facto state sponsors of terrorism, like Qatar, which we awarded under the last administration with non-NATO major ally status. And on top of that, today, we've accepted more and more business with the Qatari state, which should definitely be of concern. And of course, as many Americans and perhaps Israelis would also be concerned about India's trade relations that it enjoys with one of the largest de jure state sponsors of terrorism in Iran. So it's important to consolidate, I think, strategy when it comes to ultimately fighting terrorism. And I 100% sympathize with India and the Indian people, especially in light of the recent attack in Kashmir. Western nations need to emphasize a stronger emphasis on fighting all forms of terrorism and state sponsors thereof, regardless of the benefits that come from that de facto state sponsor, such as Qatar, or that de facto state sponsor, such as Pakistan, because of our enjoyed military relations over the years. And so it's my hope that in the coming days, the West can coordinate better with India when it comes to fighting terrorism, and that both sides will also realize dangers perhaps in state sponsors of de facto nature like Qatar, but also in terrorist groups throughout the Middle East, which India has yet to designate.
Valid points. Appreciate, gentlemen, that you became a part of this important conversation from all over the world. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.